general information, but the speakers will be there soon, the substance of the webinar. Welcome. This webinar is a joint endeavor of four projects, CIVITAS Satellite, the Interact2Cs project MOBI-MIX, the MyCorridor Horizon 2020 project, and the CIVITAS 2020 project Handshake. And you see that this that in this richness of partners presenting, it shows the issues we want to bring forward with regards to MaaS. The fact that MaaS is maturing, that it's also becoming more multifaceted, multimodal, and even cross-border. And we have a good story from MyCorridor as a first presentation later to talk about that experience. A couple of practical pointers for the webinar. So the webinar is recorded so that others and you can also enjoy it afterwards. The link will be shared. I'm asking again to the speakers to mute yourself when you're not speaking, and when we return to a panel discussion at the end of the webinar, you can open the microphone. And for the participants, please use the Q&A box as well as the chat function. We will be monitoring both to write your questions or your thoughts to start discussing, to have a good discussion also and an interaction. This webinar is a part of a series of webinars we are organizing. It's actually the close to final one of a series where we have brought the experiences of European transport innovation through research projects or Interreg projects into local action. And so we try to make the link between local practice and European research. Yeah, as said before, today the topic is mobility as a service. We had to come up with a good title, and we came up with Crossing Modal Borders, again to show that MaaS is a tool that can solve many problems. And the two issues we will discuss today is the international or the cross-border issue, but also the multimodality, and then specifically multimodality going to active travel modes with the CIVITAS Handshake project as a project working on cycling, to talk about their experience on integrating micromobility into MaaS. I want to say two things about MaaS. A very interesting experience we had here at POLIS last week. Together with EIT Urban Mobility, we were part of a larger European digital education hackathon. And we put on the table a problem, the problem namely the information and knowledge asymmetry between the public authorities and the private players in the context of new mobility services, but also in the context of MaaS. POLIS did a survey on this issue, and we saw that the readiness and the capacity, the capability of handling and understanding data and digital processes is much larger in the private sector with the private operators than with the cities. And this asymmetry actually is a problem for the future deployment. It is a stopper, a showstopper for developments, and it's something we really need to work on the digital capacities within the cities when they meet their superiors in this field, the private sector, who is much more advanced. So we brought that question to our hacketeers, we call them, and they came up with a really nice solution. They said, actually, they were university students, and they said, well, we also have a problem with this. We find it very difficult to access data about these issues, MaaS related data. to do our research and to understand this from our research perspective. And the solution they came up with was some kind of a neutral facility, a neutral platform, not a data handler or not an exchange platform to enforce or to understand or to monitor regulations, but more a knowledge hub on new mobility services and mobility as a service in a city. And they saw the university or a neutral research platform as an important player in that, and creating a win-win situation, not only for the city, who can put research questions that go a bit outside the daily motions, let's say. The mobility providers can also bring questions about how markets will evolve, for instance, how the city will change, and the universities get access to data they normally would not acquire. So food for thought, maybe inspiration for local action, a very interesting discussion, and also a win-win solution for this from this hackathon. Second thought that I want to bring forward, or an alert actually, is that you might not be aware of it, but it's actually a very important day for mobility as a service. Today is the deadline. There will be other deadlines in this process, but today is the deadline of a consultation in the scope of the revision of the ITS directive, a directive that is that you are probably well aware of, but it actually caters for or regulates the legislates the availability of mobility data, specifically from the public side. The whole process of national access points for mobility data is set in this framework, and the European Commission is currently trying to understand how the scope and the remit of the legislation can be expanded, how the ITS directive can be upgraded and updated to work with new and prepare for new issues like CCAM, connected automated mobility, but also, and that you see that in red on the slide, online platforms allowing users to access several modes of transport. So that's a nice way of putting MaaS in the spotlight. So do have a look. You have until midnight today, so it's a sea of time that's still open to answer to the questions from the survey. It's very important from the public side as well as from the operator side. It can change our worlds. Okay. Now to the real inspiration from the webinar. As I said, we have three presenters, starting with MyCorridor with Roberto Palacin. Then we move to Handshake with Cinque from Torino with Maurizio Veronese. And to conclude, we hear from MOBI-MIX of the city of Rotterdam, the coordinator of that project. We start with MyCorridor. Roberto, you were saying that you are in the final weeks of the project. That makes me very old, because I was actually a speaker at your kickoff workshop. So that means that a couple of years have gone through the sandglass of time. So I give you the floor, please.
Thank you. Actually, Koban used to use 3.5 years.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's a lot of time. Okay, I disappear in the background and I let you present.
Thank you very much, Ivo. Thank you. Let me just share my screen. Here we go. Share.
Yeah, it's working. If you can put the full screen mode, then.
Okay. Very good. So, good afternoon, and thank you very much, Ivo, for the kind introduction and for the very interesting thoughts that you have put in there. And also thank you for the whole POLIS network and Laura for organizing the event. It sounds very interesting. I'm really looking forward to the next hour. So, so you can see there that MyCorridor is a Horizon 2020 project looking at mobility as a service in a multimodal European cross-border corridor. So cross-border is clearly one of the distinctive attributes of this project. Newcastle University's coordinating institution and the actual coordinator, with CERF in Greece as the technical coordinator in terms of managing the technical implementation of the whole process, and you will hear about it in a couple of minutes. You can see that the rest of our partners in this project, so 17 partners in total. So all projects, all European projects, and all projects have a lot of aims and objectives, but I thought of, rather than just putting here those aim objectives, trying to translate it to what actually means what we wanted to do. And effectively, MyCorridor approach is underpinned on the 4 key aspects. The first one is defining the disruptive nature of MaaS. Now, that might sound a bit obsolete now, because we move on a lot since we started the project 3.5 years ago, and since we wrote the proposal maybe 4.5, even 5 years ago. So clearly, I think Ivo has alluded to it, we are in a, if not in a mature MaaS, certainly we are moving phases from the very conceptual, would it be great if we could do this, to actually doing it. So, but nevertheless, one of the pillars that underpin our work was trying to find the evidence that define that disruptive nature, and that was one of the things that we wanted to achieve, and I think we have achieved, and we'll talk about it in a second. The second one is the practical implementation of TM 2.0, Traffic Management 2.0, which is the, for those of you if you're not aware of it, is the sort of the protocols for traffic management, road traffic management, developed by ERTICO, the European Intelligent Transport Systems Organization. So looking into the practical implementation of TM 2.0, and also by doing so, creating the foundations towards what could be improved in a future 2.1 version, or whatever we want to call it, maybe 3.0, whatever might be decided to be called. The third pillar, or the third clear aspect, was the technical aspects of MaaS in terms of developing not just the back office, the front office, and everything that goes in between, but also how you can generate mobility tokens that are on a one-stop shop that will actually be suitable for roaming. So it's relatively understood how you will do that for a particular geolocation where you have a single city MaaS, or maybe a country or a region. But when you start crossing borders, how you could actually develop mobility tokens, effectively integrated tickets, and the proof that you have your ticket, that you have permission to travel, how you can develop that from a technical perspective. The final, but definitely not least important, is providing evidence-based recommendations on a number of areas in terms of acceptability, business models, but also integration of different platforms and modes, as well as the role of incentives, and definitely policy and other aspects related to that, which is again a very distinctive aspect of MyCorridor. We have looked at policy, I have looked at legal aspects, I beg your pardon, and those are something that is quite unique of our project, and we found very interesting things. Briefly, the one-stop shop, I think you're probably kind of aware of how these things work. This is a very simplified schematic of what it looks like, but basically once there is a traffic in your left-hand side of your screen, once there is a demand through the front end of the app in terms of a demand for transport, which it could be an individual standing at home or in a station, or actually someone in a car, for example, share mobility, and that's where traffic management comes into place. There is a interaction with traffic management system, which is two ways. So informing traffic management systems of traffic demand, and informing the app of potential issues with the traffic situations to kind of inform the decision-making process that happens on the back office. Then the user profile is matched between the MyCorridor ecosystem, the gateway for all the service providers, and a matchmaking process that will generate a token for traveling once the business rules and the payments have been, and the quality of service have been cleared. All this happening in a second or less. So this is kind of the logic behind the technical aspects, which I think everybody will be familiar with. We also means that we have developed a full working app. You can go to the full working app for the pilot sites in particular, or you can interact with it at any location. You can go to the App Store or the Apple Store, sorry, or the Google Store, the Google Play Store, so Android and iOS. And you can download it. So look for it, MyCorridor. You can see that. So this is a research app, mobility app, but we have developed equivalents to services, multimodal services, info-mobility services, traffic management services. We have included products. We call them MaaS and Go for a pay-as-you-go packs and offers. So everything that you will find in any MaaS platform that you might have available in your location, perhaps. So we have developed all this as well as part of the project. We also developed a very simple, very easy to use, very user-friendly service registration tool for service providers, where they can actually provide a brief amount of data and fundamentally their API to connect it to the platform, and that's the only thing they need to do to be able to access it. So we also developed that as part of the process. So with all this in mind, and bear in mind I'm skipping an awful lot of the work that has gone behind the scenes of all this, we developed pilots. So we have 5 different pilot sites. You can see the map in there in Greece, in Italy, in Rome, in Salzburg, in Prague, and Amsterdam. Unfortunately, our monitoring period was between March and October this year, which clearly is not the best time to try to gauge how people use public transport, because we were in the middle of, still are in the middle of a pandemic, and there was a lot of, in an awful lot of locations, there was actually a national instruction on not to travel. So it was really, really challenging, but I want to publicly acknowledge the excellent work that my colleagues in the project have done to relentlessly working on this project and making sure that they are deployed, the pilots are deployed, and we managed to log 158 single users in all these locations and record something close to 900 trips. You can see on the right-hand side of your screen the distribution per site. This is really an excellent basis in terms of data for research, in terms of sample data for research. So we completed this on the 30th of October, and we're currently going through the data. We also been looking at parallel to the pilots and business models. And again, the business models, we have developed 4 different scenarios based on whether the MaaS governance or the MaaS platform is a private or public-led, and whether it's deployed on an urban or in a rural, interurban environment, which clearly will link to also to issues on roaming. So we look at this, and the different scenarios will have different objectives. So public-led, for instance, will probably have a higher emphasis on societal goals as opposed to perhaps a private one, which will be looking at maximizing revenue. So those are the kind of things that we looked into. So the consultation has involved focus groups and interviews in Austria, Greece, Italy, and the Czech Republic, as well as interviews in the UK, which it wasn't planned in the beginning, but we thought would be add value to the whole process. We have the roundtables, we have focus groups and interviews, as I said. And again, we are in the middle of processing this data. Some preliminary results, and I appreciate that you cannot read the legend there, but it's fine. It's the only way I'll put it in one screen. This is an example of it, but I'm going to talk you through it. So in terms of in Austria, Greece, and Italy, some of the results, for instance, for the question to stakeholders in terms of what is the benefits that were perceived by the different stakeholders in terms of being part of an ecosystem like MyCorridor. So in other words, a MaaS application or MaaS platform that allows roaming. In the middle of the screen, you see there the most significant benefit that it was recognized was the enhanced connectivity between different modes. So the the ability of such a platform to integrate modes and make it multimodal, even if it's cross-border multimodal. You also had on the left-hand side of your screen a high recognition of the facilitation of this platform to maintain customer relationships, but also gain new customers. In other words, model shift, which is closely related by the results on the right-hand side of your screen. We look at guaranteeing services for the mobility impaired. So accessibility aspects, which again looks related to the customers and new customers, as well as the trustworthiness in the service provision. So these are very interesting outcomes. Some of these stakeholders are not really involved in any discussions on MaaS, or MaaS was news to them. Another example, final example, looks at what kind of impact was perceived by the stakeholders in a 3 to 5 years horizon, if we were to be part of a platform like MyCorridor. And again, issues around data sharing, how you actually will change how data is shared, where on the right-hand side, the most relevant impacts, closely followed by the changes in business models and the adding partnership for the value chain. So again, really significant impacts in there that could facilitate the deployment of MaaS. So in conclusion, MaaS means different things to different people. I think now that's kind of it's obvious, although when we did that consultation in terms of looking at the meaning of MaaS and the understanding of the concept was 3 years ago. But really MaaS, there's no universal definition of what MaaS is, as there is no universal business model. There are different business models for different situations, which are dictated by the urban form, the local policy, the cultural aspects of where we want to deploy MaaS. So there's no right or wrong, but just the different types, different assessments, different business models could fit different cities and locations. Technical integration of the services into a common MaaS platform, I would say is the only way, but certainly is the best way of creating a mobility ecosystem that supports integrated mobility. We have found out that the slightest glitch on the technical and the technical ability of the platform to provide the service that is expected in terms of perhaps the information from a particular service or not accessing services in the way that is expected, it really breaks down the trust immediately. There's no middle ground. It's either you fully trust it or you don't. And in the same way that users will download the app and will try it on a pay-as-you-go, as soon as the app is not working or there's a little glitch, they will just then delete it and move to something else. So I think having a fully functional, fully validated platform from a technical perspective is essential to be able to make it a success. We also find out that incentives do have a role to play. Why we should be using this, particularly for frequent users, frequent travelers, commuters, and frequent travelers across border. And last but definitely not least, policy and privacy, which are unique to our project, as far as I know, we're the first ones to really look at these issues, particularly GDPR, are essential issues in terms of or essential concerns that has to be addressed in order to facilitate this. An example of this, for instance, is how the regulation for third-party provision of selling tickets to certain services are nationally regulated might contradict the regulation from a bordering country and therefore not allowed to sell the tickets and have that cross-border traffic through the app. So that's an example of something that we have discovered. More information, mycorridor.eu, and I think you have my details. So that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto. Very interesting. The result of years of hard work. I would. There's two things that I noticed in the slide that you showed about the change that is expected or perceived. So there were also two areas that scored low. So there was the the staffing issue, and also the revenue. So basically, what it means to me, it's also a positive story to say, okay, it's also MaaS becomes a bit business as usual, and it's not a shocker. It's not a shock, but it's a useful tool that can integrate in the current structures and the current.
Absolutely. So it's a bit of being seen as something that can actually improve what we do and break down some of the barriers that we have. And because we've been talking about it for a while, it's been part of the discourse in the transport community for a few years now, since 2014, 2015. Now it's more accepted and is recognized. And as I said, there's different definitions of MaaS. In some environments, what we think is not MaaS for that particular location, it will be sufficient to call it MaaS. So MaaS has become a more general approach to digitally integrated services for transport. And I think that's the evolution that particularly public transport is following anyway. So this is something that, again, as you rightly spotted there, not necessarily in terms of the staffing or revenues, although revenue increases or maintaining revenue.
The ambition, and then we move to Maurizio, but the ambition that you formulated about the project to also look at feeding data into traffic management, and so actually informing not only the individual traveler, but getting from that source information that gives system level information. Did you do something with how far is that developed?
So that was only a feature of one in particular, a couple of pilots, but one in particular in Rome that we will try to integrate that. So that feature is particularly relevant when where there is a lot of car sharing services. So you can actually see how this traffic demand in terms of road traffic demand and how that can be. So that feature has been very interesting in the implementation phase. Clearly, we haven't had as much data we would like to because of the period, but it's giving us enough clues, and we're still processing the data into what areas could be developed further. But certainly, I think it's a very good or a very interesting feature of potential future MaaS platforms to have a very interactive link with the traffic management systems, and potentially also traffic management with public transport, metros and buses as well. So there is an aspect to further research in terms of how you could make fully integrated.
Thank you, Roberto. That's a very interesting chat question as well that I hope you can answer, because it's quite specific for you. Okay. And I asked this last question about the system performance or the feedback to the system level, also in view of the next speaker, because sustainability is a big concern for cities and regions. And to make our MaaS systems more green or more sustainable, including active travel, is an important factor in that. And the Handshake project is looking into that. So Maurizio, I give the floor to you. Maurizio works for 5T in Torino and is a partner in Handshake. I must say the project is focusing on cycling, so they were a bit, when we asked them, like, we really need you in this webinar, they were like, yeah, why? But then they understood, and that's why Maurizio is here. Yeah.
Hi everybody, I'm Maurizio Veronese for 5T. I'm a business leader in 5T of a business unit that follows projects and services related to mobility as a service and to information about the means of transport. We keep them joined because we think that information services are strictly related to the MaaS applications and allows the providing of level 1 of the MaaS and to allow the user to plan his trip. So we keep them joined. Just a quick overview, if I... Okay. Overview of the company. 5T is completely owned by public sector. The owner are the city of Turin, the Piedmont region, and the metropolitan area of Turin. And we work on mobility in various topics on mobility, from traffic management, public transport ticketing, public transport monitoring, and mobility as a service also. And we think that mobility as a service and electric mobility are the key for the future of mobility, and so we are very interested into this kind of initiative. And we also are a member of MaaS Alliance that help us to keep informed on all the initiative on MaaS that are running around the world, and they're very interesting working group. So what's MaaS? What's our view of MaaS? MaaS is the possibility to have in a single digital mobility app all the mobility service we have on the ground in our area, and the citizen can access these mobility services on demand through a single platform, through a single payment system, and that allows him to plan a single trip and possibly have a pack or bundle of services to provide a real alternative to the private car. We have 5 levels of MaaS, starting from 0, no integration, to the upper level, level 4, that mix policies and government topics and allow the public administration to govern the mobility as a service. This is an interesting slide because we think that MaaS comes anyway, because it's a new form of investing, is a new form of business, and a lot of companies are working to provide MaaS services. But we think that if the public administration doesn't govern the change, the MaaS will come anyway. But in that case, the public governance is forced to follow the market and not vice versa. And there is the risk to the platforming of public transport that we know is the backbone of the MaaS, but if the rules are in charge of the market, we can lose the possibility to govern the paradigm, the initiative. And the real actor of the MaaS will become just the MaaS operator. But we want to govern the MaaS to keep in the middle the citizen and the mobility operator. But if we do something, we can govern the rule of the games, and the ecosystem must be attractive, could be attractive for the MaaS operator. And we can drive the digital transformation and reach, if it's possible, through the policies, environmental and mobility goals. So it's very important for us. That's a small overview of the MaaS project. The first MaaS project we joined was the iMove project. That was a cousin project of MyCorridor, and the other one of H2020 initiative was MaaS for You. We were partnered with the city of Turin, and I go fast on this slide because I don't want I want to leave time for the question, but it was very interesting. We had on the ground living lab with citizen of the city and with a private company, General Motors here in Turin. And we test the MaaS level 2. So as we have seen in MaaS level 2, the user can plan his trip, level 1, and can buy the single ride or the combination of 2 rides through the app. During the project, we provided some goods, some price for the users, so we can say we reached a little bit a part of the level 4 of the MaaS scale, and it was very, very useful to understand a lot of things. No? Okay. We reach a lot of benefits in terms of savings of CO2, and we had a very, very interesting feedback from the user. And what we learned? We learned that MaaS application can be very useful to change the mind of the people and the culture of mobility for the citizen, but also for the operator, because not all the operators are ready to MaaS. I think one more important thing is the number 4, because we understood that pay-as-you-go and pay-per-use models at the moment are favorite by the users instead of bundle of packages, because I think there are a lot of things that are not well known at the moment about the MaaS. The people are not confident to buy a potentially high spending bundle instead of pay-per-use single trip. So that's what we understood, and that's the project, the MaaS project we at the moment we have on the run. Buoni mobilità. We are testing mobility vouchers, and in a 12 months testing period, we hope to reach more than 1,000 people. Just 100 of them will be financed by the project. The other will pay the service by themselves. And the primary goal is to test the MaaS bundle on level 3 and applying policy to govern the mobility, positioning the MaaS on level 4. The status of the art, you know, because the pandemic is a very conditioning situation for this project. So we are preparing all the needs, and we are quite ready to start. But we have stopped the start of the Living Lab, the testing, because at the moment we are in lockdown. The people can't go away, so they can move around the city with our mobility bundle. We selected the operator that will provide the services, MyCorridor, an Italian company that already provide this kind of services on level 1, 2 of the MaaS. And we are starting with the tender for the citizen that will join the test experimentation. We are integrating 15 transport operators, and as you can see, most of them are micromobility operators. So we are on the way, but we can say something about the integration of the mobility operator in this project. And we say that not all the operators are ready to integrate into the MaaS. And as you can see on the left column, we have quite high readiness for micromobility and then for taxi, but the public transport is very hard to integrate. And then we can see why. Which are the major issues regarding the difficulties to integrate the mobility services into the MaaS? The first one is the finance exposition, because the cash flow, especially for public transport, is very important. And the other are exchange standards that sometimes are missing or are not complete, legal and insurance risk. We are talking especially about driving license or the cost of the mean. So sometimes it's different if I take a kick scooter or a car. The price of the good is completely different. So it's the risk to lose it is important to consider. And then user data management and commercial agreements. Why? We see that sharing micromobility is ready to be transformed into the MaaS. Why? Because they are open to collaborations. They are a newcomer on the market, so they have new services and they need users. So they are open to be integrated, to be collaborative with other kind of mobility paradigm and mobility MaaS operators. Other important things, usually they are worldwide companies, and MaaS is going everywhere. They are in contact with MaaS operators in all over the world. They are used to collaborate with them. Usually they are digital updated. They are a company with strong digital skills, and they have quite exchange standards, stable, GBFS, MDS, and some other standards that are growing, are quite stable. And
Maurizio, can you conclude? Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Is last slide. They have low budget assets, so they have low loss risk. So I think it's the last slide.
Okay. Thank you very much. So a lot of potential, a lot of room to experiment also. Very interesting. Thank you, Maurizio. I will keep questions also for the end of the session, and we'll move to Soufian. He's active in the MOBI-MIX project, which is working on mixed mobility solutions, or including a lot of MaaS in the context of a North Sea, two seas Interreg project, where Rotterdam has the honor to be the coordinator also of this project. So Soufian, the floor is yours. I hope the sharing of the presentation works.
Thank you very much, Ivo. I will try to share my screen as first. Share. So.
Yes, it works well.
Okay, great. First of all, as Ivo mentioned, my name is Soufian, and I'm working as a smart mobility advisor at the city of Rotterdam. So I want also to say thank you for the invitation to give the opportunity to speak within this webinar about the MOBI-MIX project, and I'm really excited to present to you the developed implementation guide. So the objective, if we talk about the MOBI-MIX project, first of all, the city of Rotterdam, as Ivo already mentioned, is lead partner of this consortium with 11 parties. So this European project fits perfectly in our policy document we're currently developing on smart mobility. Questions like what is coming at us, what is the impact on the city, and what is our role as a municipality. So together with other European cities, international companies and knowledge institutions like POLIS, we will investigate and test this in practice. So what should the policy be in this area? How do we deal with companies that offer new mobility services? What agreements do you make with these companies? So these are some of the questions we are going to answer in the next 2 years with the new contract models and governance structure. We will build relationships with new parties that also want to make mobility offer broader and more diverse in our cities. So MOBI-MIX is also a tool. So within the consortium, we also want to join forces. So first of all, it is important to learn from each other. There's no need to invent the wheel by yourself, but to share the experiences, to share knowledge is the most important topic. But also, if we talk about efficiency, we would really like to jointly purchase expertise, make also informed decisions, and have access to a wider network of experts. I think it's very important in this area. But also get some extra funding to further support our activities, and also with the other cities. So some of the key facts, we already started on March 2020, so a little bit of strange start, of course, with this pandemic. This project will end at September 2022. There are 11 project partners, and there is quite a budget, which is funded by the European Union, of course. But we still have to also to put in our own budget, of course, to make these solutions work and also create tools for the future. So if we talk about the project partners, as I mentioned before, there are 5 cities participating, but also other network organization and knowledge institutes, just like universities and also POLIS, of course, with their network. So if we talk about the challenges we face, I think we can talk about 3 important challenges. To respond, of course, to the technology push we are in at this moment. Also, of course, it depends on the development on this area. Just like the other speakers said, mobility as a service is a great opportunity. But there are still a lot of challenges to face. So I think we think it's very important to effectively collaborate with the private sector and share data and share knowledge, of course, but also make agreements from both sides. But also take this knowledge with us to the governance and also establishing policy and creating more how do you say it, energy to really get solutions. And of course, the most important also to develop and improve local mobility plans. So the knowledge and the information and the challenges we face and the experiences we have must also affect our mobility plans also for the future, to take this knowledge and adapt this also in our plans for the future. So one of the results already is that we developed an implementation guide, also known as a decision-making tool, for example. So this guide will help cities to effectively implement a public-private collaboration model within the smart mobility world. So this tool is based on 3 pillars, which follow one another as a process. So the first one, the strategic decision, the solution versus the challenge-driven approach. The starting point is of course to identify and select an adequate procurement. Sorry, that's the second one. So before implementing the new shared mobility solutions, we as cities need to be aware and also reflect on the two main approaches as a starting point to also identify and select an adequate procurement process. And this also leads to the second one, how to select this type of procurement for selecting the providers who you want to have active in your city. And also, of course, the type of partnership you are going to face during the implementation. So this is more about the way you want to get involved as a city in this kind of solutions, because there's also a question, of course, towards the municipalities. So this tool is already live. It is a dynamic tool, so you can click through it by yourself. So I would really like to invite you to have a look at this tool by yourself. I think Paulus will also share this link to everybody. So and if you have some topics or some things you want to know more, please contact us. But also you can contact, of course, POLIS to get more information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Soufian. Very interesting. I think it's the reason why we are also engaged in MOBI-MIX is because it breeds the spirit of a local authority that wants to take an active role in the MaaS environment, in the new mobility services ecosystem, keeps oversight and is a real enabler, and the MOBI-MIX tools also go in that direction. So I think that's a really good approach. For the 10-15 minutes of concluding discussions, I give the floor to my colleague Laura, who is also active in MOBI-MIX and who has also is working in other contexts on this topic. Laura, there's something strange with your camera. There's it's partly covered.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. So I'll disappear. I'll be back in 10-15 minutes. So the floor is yours, Laura. And Soufian and Maurizio, please turn on your cameras and we can.
Yes.
See. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So thank you all for your presentations. Very, very interesting. And I invite everyone, if you have any particular questions that you thought during the presentations and you were shy to share, I invite you all to share now if you think of them while we discuss now. I have a first question for especially the MaaS experts, for Roberto and Maurizio. So you mentioned both the integrating ticketing, and it's actually a very important milestone for any MaaS deployment to achieve to that level that you can have ticketing and booking and payment all together. And my question is, how can we make sure that the platforms that we will promote the sustainable mobility with this integrated ticketing? So platforms that actually encourage behavior change and keeps public transport as the backbone of the system, instead of perhaps giving them more higher weight to ride sharing modes that could eventually increase traffic.
I don't know if you want to go, Maurizio. I'll give you a go anyway. Well, it's a very broad question, isn't it? So there are different ways that you could potentially do that. Clearly, by default, the fact that someone is interested in using an integrated tool, and then that kind of gives you a bit of an indication that will be willing to do what is good for the environment type of thing. So the user settings normally allow to promote these type of preferences. So you can clearly cost is one of them, and time is another one. But you can also add the minimizing impact as part of your choices that you get in your travel. There can be incentives associated with this. So again, it depends on the scenarios. So when I was talking about 4 different scenarios, this is, for instance, a public-led MaaS initiative, then clearly this will be a priority. So there might be incentives to minimize, so to maximize, use of public transport in the way that the tool is configured, and also in terms of, you might get extra. I don't know, for instance, you can have loyalty schemes that the more you travel, the more extra points you get. You could get potentially to integrate active mobility and micromobility in the, if you use public transport as opposed to share rides or cars, then you could get your first last mile e-scooter for free. You know, these kind of promotions are suitable for MaaS. So MaaS is this, when we talk about services, it's not just mobility services. You can add other services that might be complementary to mobility. So in that spectrum, in that space, you can add incentives to it. So that's one potential way of improving that uptake.
I totally agree. I don't know, from my point of view, car sharing is not a competitor of public transport, because there are a lot of reasons that drives the people choosing a mean of transport instead of other one. I don't know how it is in your city, but in Turin, with €3, you can run zigzag all over the day with public transport, and with car sharing we can drive just 10 or 12 minutes. So you can go in the city center with car sharing in 12 minutes from the suburbs. So one of the key is the budget, but you can see that weather conditions or environmental sensibility or age of the people can drive some of the choices. And I think the competition between means of transport, it's a reality. In case of public transport, I think bike sharing is a good competitor. But we as said previously during the presentation, we can drive, we can help the people making the right choice. I think that the incentives or gamification schemas are very, very interesting way to drive the people making an environmental choice better for the people, better for the city, I think. Roberto?
Perhaps adding to that, of course, yeah, car sharing has pros and cons like everything else, depending on what car you're sharing, what sort of engine the car has, and what sort of power propulsion, you know, if it's an electric car, but it's still producing congestion, still creating a problem. It's also perhaps how we design the mobility packages. So I think is well known, the example in Helsinki that you know, if you get the big €500 a month package or thereabouts, you know, you could potentially get unlimited taxis and car hire. So actually, you're never going to touch a public transport. You might actually, it's cheaper than having a car with you know, with insurance and everything else. So you just depend, but you are always on a taxi. So it also is a wider thing. It's just having again, it goes back to who's driving the implementation of MaaS, which is private or is public, and where the priorities in there. And I think the more clearly climate change, environmental impact, and decarbonization is very high on the agenda of every single country, and it's going to be in the next 10 years. It's going to be everywhere, and there's going to be my prediction is going to be the more than cost benefit analysis. There will be a carbon analysis in any investment related to transport. So carbon is going to become a metric that you need to meet in order to get funding. So that's my prediction, that in the next few years that's going to happen in the public sector. So there are ways, but clearly a lot of work to do as well.
Definitely, you have explained it in a way that you show that there are ways, and that actually that MaaS can be used as an asset to precisely encourage that behavior change. Just you were talking about the public-led, private-led, and I have a question to Soufian about that.
Yes.
Because you were, Roberto, in your presentation, you already exposed the different models, and you associated the public-led with the societal goals, the private-led with potential revenue. And I have a question with Soufian. It's about this implementation guide on how to help establish this partnership between public and private. Do you think that can this guide, these sort of tools, help the cities cooperate with the private operators to achieve the higher societal goals?
Good question. I think this tool will facilitate the understanding of the city involvement within this kind of mobility solutions, because there are a lot of cities that maybe have a lot of control about the mobility solution that are working already in the cities, but there still are a lot of cities which don't have any control what's happening in their city. So this handbook really gives you tools to create more control over your own city. So to make agreements with this kind of private companies, but also what do you have to do on the policy side, on the governance side, to really achieve this and take back the control about your city. And also as well, of course, there are still risks and there are still financial responsibilities, but it also depends on what kind of involvement do you want to have as a city. So I really do think that this handbook will give you tools and insights, but you still have to do the work by yourself as a city.
Okay, I think that's a really good conclusion for the webinar. Also, even if there's tools around and there's the support, it's also the boots on the ground that will make the difference. And that's also been said by Roberto, who was talking about locally tailored business plans, and by Maurizio, who has explained the mobility mix for the specific situation he was in. I will share my screen for a final message to conclude before thanking the speakers. Next week, we spend our days at POLIS to prepare for our annual conference. You see that online. You see the screen that we are going virtual from 30 November to 3 December. So you're very much welcome. And the topics discussed in the webinar will also reappear there. And we are back for one final outro of the MOMOP webinar series on cycling highway innovations on 17 December. So the moment you're already cuddling up for Christmas, there is still this that you can then enjoy under the Christmas tree, 4 o'clock on 17 December. So thank you, Soufian. Thank you, Roberto. Thank you also Maurizio and Laura. And yeah, we'll be in touch about this interesting topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.